Welcome to the Committee for Oklahoma Prosperity podcast with Mike Mazie, CEO of Trinity Strategic Wealth, former state senator, and Oklahoma Secretary of Finance. Mike talks with public policy and industry leaders about needed transformative changes to make Oklahoma a top 10 state for people to live, work, and retire.
Thanks for joining us today. We're happy here at the Committee for Oklahoma Prosperity to get some time with my friend and leader in the Oklahoma State Senate, Senator Dewayne Pemberton. Dwayne's had a phenomenal career in education. He's chairman of the Retirement Committee, one of the key leaders for the landmark legislation that took place for school choice in Oklahoma. So we're going to get to hear about how some of that came to pass. More importantly, he's got three sons and a passel of grandkids. How many grandkids is it up to, Dewayne?
Well, and this coming May, in a few weeks, I'll have number 9, Mike.
Oh, 9 grandkids. That's awesome. And I've always been amazed with the Pemberton clan because if I recall, all 3 of your sons served our country in the military. So tell us what the Pemberton men are up to and maybe some of the fun craziness going on with your kids and your grandkids.
Well, thank you, Mike. I mean, I'm real proud of my sons. All 3 of them served United States with the National Guard, actually as Army members. Ben went in 2004 when it was still a hot war over there and was involved in the Battle of Fallujah since we were scared to death every day when we didn't hear from him.
Wow.
Combat, basically construction crew, which they basically went over there to rebuild the roads, and they did a lot of IED repairs and stuff, but they were also involved in that Battle of Fallujah. My other 2 sons, Matt and Adam, went over in 2008, and they were military police, and they basically walked the tiff of the Baghdad prison and took care of the prisoners over there for 18 months. So real proud of them, and they all got back safe and sound, no major injuries or problems other than maybe those little hearing issues because of concussion and things of that nature, but they're here and doing well. And grandkids are playing every sport known to man, ranging from 14 all the way down to, like I said, one's getting ready to be born, but I've got a newborn, a 16-month-old, a 5-year-old, 11-year-old, a 12-year-old, 13 to 14-year-old. So I've got them all ages.
A great American family and a true Oklahoma legacy you got going there. Maybe the Mazies will reach your level at some point, but none of my 5 kids are married yet, so we've got some patience at hand. One of the things that we find fascinating at the Committee for Oklahoma Prosperity, Senator, is that when I talk to small business owners, successful entrepreneurs, and I ask them, what's the greatest danger or obstacle for Oklahoma to get to that next level of growth and prosperity, they don't bring up job incentives. They don't bring up, traditional economic development issues. They always talk to me about education and the need to have, proficiency in reading and proficiency in math and a well-educated workforce. So there's obviously some needs for transformation, and one of those big transformation items happened last legislative session, right sort of at the finish line, I guess even with a special session. And you were in the middle of all of that, some high tense negotiations going on. Why don't you share with us what that experience was like and how you and a few others finally got the House and Senate together to launch universal school choice for parents in Oklahoma?
Well, thank you, Mike. It was a trial and error last year. I mean, education took all the air out of all the oxygen out of the room right off the bat, and stalemate the entire session until about the last month. And Senator Treat Pro Tem Treat came to me and said, "Hey, would you mind being negotiating with him and Adam, Senator McCourtney, and I said I would be happy to. So we met as our negotiating team. Gosh, it seemed like that last month. We were meeting anywhere from early in the morning till midnight at night, trying to come up with strategies. And then we'd meet with the House and the governor, and it was a full blown negotiation. The governor was in the room just about every time we met. We off way apart. I think the one thing that everybody, all three bodies, the governor, the House, and the Senate, agreed on was that we wanted school choice of some kind. But then going from there, that's where the changes came. We knew that we wanted, to put about $750 million, in education. That's including the $150 million to start the school choice. How to do that? We spent a lot of time in negotiations with our own caucus, trying to decide how we wanted to structure the school choice. And one of the things that about everybody wanted to is they wanted to put some kind of an income cap on it to start with, and we wanted to push the dollars down to the people that needed it most. So if you saw the way that came out, we pushed the dollars down to families that had incomes of $75,000 or less to start with. Okay. Once that money, those groups were satisfied, then it kicked back up to the next level, which was $150,000, and then above that. So we were able to all agree on that pretty quick. And then the teacher pay raise became a sticking issue. Both sides wanted a pay raise because that was really a condition for the school choice, is making sure that we paid our teachers adequately. The House wanted to run the money outside the formula, which you understand that. We wanted to run the money through the formula, so it's per pupil and based on wealth. So we fought on that for about 3 weeks and finally had a compromise with them. We decided to put $125 million into the Red Bud Fund, which they like, and we really didn't, but that pushes money towards those school districts that have low ad valorem and don't have a lot of, are poor. And the rural, and the House was pushing more for money for the rural schools as opposed to the more urban type schools. So, and then probably the thing that brought us all together finally, I will say, was my idea was to put $150 million over 3 years into school security, basically SRO, school resource officers, because the safety issues we're having in the schools across the country over the last 2 or 3 decades. And I'm hearing superintendents say, don't just give us more money, give us SROs. We need armed security in our buildings. So I'm happy to say this year we have gone up about 275 SROs across the state in our schools.
Great.
And with some changes and some tweaks in the law that I'm pushing the bill this year that will help us even put some more in there. Hopefully we'll have every school in the state with an SRO with it. So we finally all agreed. The pay raise would go through the formula. We put the Red Bud Fund, $125 million there, $150 over 3 years into school security, then the $150 million this year into school choice with caps on it and tiers, and next year it goes up to $200, and in 2 years it goes up to $250 million. So the total package is about $750 million reoccurring revenue.
Yeah, really big deal. Thank you for your service. Quite the landmark. And I talk to parents all the time that are just, so excited that they've got this level of flexibility and option and control and choice where they send their kids to school. Is there any way, Senator Pemberton, to get like a refund for those of us who did it in the past, with 5 kids in private schools? When you have triplets, you just kind of end up in private schools, and man, I would have saved a lot of money.
Much as I like you, I just don't think.
Probably can't go backward. It's good for the future. Now, as a small business, owner and, a finance nerd, I'm always looking at numbers and percentages. And whereas, universal school choice is going to enhance education outcomes for hundreds, if not thousands and thousands of students across the state, the reality is that even in most long-term school choice states, you still have 95% of the kids staying in public schools. And in Oklahoma, we know the outcomes have been just really awful in terms of reading, proficiency scores. Some schools are better than others, and some conditions are better than others. But when you have 80% of eighth graders that can't, read at proficiency, they're obviously shortchanged in terms of having success in high school and being ready for life, and being ready for the workforce. So, you've been a teacher and a coach and a principal. Why did we get to this kind of underperformance in terms of just teaching reading proficiency, Senator? And what do you think has to be done to shift the curve in the other direction?
Oh, thank you for the question. I'll tell you what, there's a multiplicity of things that
I know
into that. We weren't doing great, but we were doing fairly average before COVID. COVID kind of knocked us back, especially since the schools during that time under the leadership of Hoffmeister decided that we weren't going to be in school. School districts were prepared for virtual learning. So there really was no other aspect for that. Most of the schools tried the best they could. I know some of the schools just shut their doors and walked away. So we lost a year and a half to our education, and the kids got out of the practice of actually reading, got out of the practice of doing homework. And over the last year or so, talking to my friends that are in the superintendency schools, the kids came back and really weren't ready to learn because they were used to not having to learn or having to be, their discipline aspects pretty much had pretty much fallen apart. So we see a lot of issues relating to that, but that is something that we're really working on right now. And there's still a lot of issues here in Oklahoma with generational poverty. There's a lot of problems, still relating to the lack of parental support. You talk about, the school choice, but what you end up with, a lot of the people that take their kids to private schools have parents and family or two-parent families that are focused on education. Education is the way. Education is the way to be successful. But in a lot of our school districts across the state, especially in our urban areas, that's not how some parents see that. And there aren't, we don't have some of those two-parent families. A lot of kids are living with their aunts and their grandparents, and there's not a focus on education. So some of this is cultural, and I legislate our way out of the cultural issue. And that's the tough thing. But right now, what we're focusing on is something that Senator Pugh and them have done, and I'm very supportive of, is we're really trying to get back into and make sure that our colleges and universities that are sending us teachers are making sure they're using the right curriculum and teaching their reading teachers how to teach reading and writing effectively. And that's the main thing right now, we're trying to do with that is the science of reading. So every college and university uses a separate program. Only 2 of them in the state are using the science of reading.
Out of 23 colleges in Oklahoma, only 2 of them are using the science of reading?
They're using different reading formats and things that they've used for decades. So the conversations with the chancellor with higher ed this session has been, we need to start teaching the science of reading universally in all of our teacher preparation programs. And for the teachers that are out in the classrooms now that were not taught that way, money for staff development so that we can teach them through staff development sessions what the science of reading says and the research. It's all phonics based. Get right back to it. When I was a kid, we learned to read phonically, but
me too.
Phonetically. But as time went on, there were a lot of different types of reading theories, and a lot of them just have not borne out to be very successful. So that's really the big push now, is putting money in, getting the colleges and universities to buy into the fact that we need to be teaching a uniform curriculum to our reading teachers, get into the classrooms and the schools and make the teachers that are already out know how to do that and begin to really focus on pushing reading. A lot of the schools around here that I'm associated with have an English class and a reading class. So we're actually double. But in some areas, they don't have the staff or the curriculum right now, but we're working really hard to get that done. We know that's a big deal, Mike, and it's a big push. And there was some legislation this session that changed the Reading Sufficiency Act and pushed it more towards that direction. So big changes in Oklahoma curriculum regarding reading.
Well, that science of reading is so important. You may not remember, but I married a teacher. And she felt like some of that other stuff that was getting away from phonics meant that she had to take our own kids and for a little while do some homeschooling because she was just scared they weren't going to get taught, phonetically like you and I were. You mentioned the Reading Sufficiency Act. When I was still in the Senate, when we passed that legislation, we thought, Dewayne, it was going to be a bit of a game changer because we were going to end, quote unquote, quote, social promotion, end quote, in terms of, Johnny and Susie get moved along to the next grade, even if they're not at a basic reading level. And the Reading Sufficiency Act back then required an assessment and then some measurement. And if, the measurement showed basic reading levels or proficiency, then, you could move on to the next class or the next grade, I should say. Well, everyone kind of went berserk because there were too many tests and oh my gosh, some of the folks in the education establishment said, we can't be teaching to the test. And as a free market capitalist, I never understood that because the market or the business world tests us every week. I mean, if you don't pass the test, you start to fail. So weak-kneed Republicans kind of caved to that pressure. And the next thing you know, we stopped the testing, and then we created all these loopholes, or Johnny and Susie could still move to the next grade because we didn't want to hurt their self-esteem if they couldn't read. Never mind you, if they can read, they'd have better self-esteem. So when you're starting to reinforce some accountability and transparency with the Reading Sufficiency Act now, what's the discussion? What's the legislation looking like?
Research shows if you can't read by the time you leave third grade, your chance of being successful later in life is not good. So we come back and realize that. As far as, the requirements to move on, I'm not familiar right now with what any other new steps that have been put in. I think the major focus is finding new ways to assess and also new methodology, tutoring, putting more dollars into having those tutors there to make sure kids are meeting those standards and moving on ahead as far as that.
Okay. When here in Tulsa we talk about reading sufficiency, there have been some conversations, ringing a 5-alarm fire and saying we got to get in there and help these kids catch up, particularly after COVID. There's a lot of extra money in, the checking and savings accounts of the state of Oklahoma right now, which is a good thing. You conservative Republicans have tried to be fiscally responsible with this, rush of money the last couple of years. Is it conceivable that we should put, $50, $100, $200 million in some sort of 2 to 3 year program so every school district can have some, money and resources for the curriculum and the teacher time to go into the reading class or the after-school class to assess all these kids who need an extra hand? They've got a bit of a pilot project going on here in Tulsa Public Schools between the State Department of Education and our new superintendent, Dr. Ebony Johnson, and they're using some extra lottery money to pay for resources and curriculum to literally take 700 students that have been assessed as in need, and they're going to try to get them up to a basic reading level. What are your thoughts on that kind of dollar commitment to spread some catch up across the entire set of 500 school districts?
Well, I mean, we're having those same conversations too, because the ESSER $1 and the ESSER $2, there's a ton of dollars that were spent by the federal government in the state of Oklahoma for those tutoring programs. Did a lot of those in the summer. We're still doing those.
Okay.
Title IX schools, which are those schools in poverty, that have low reading scores. There's a ton of money that comes in each year because as a principal at Muskogee High, we were a Title IX school. We got tens of thousands of dollars for tutors. Our biggest problem, and I think what problem a lot of people have, is finding people to tutor. Right now with the 2.7, our unemployment rate is down to about 2.6 or 2.7. There's just not a lot of people out there, and at the same time, getting them to come into the school. I think the state superintendent even proposed in his budget paying $35, $45 an hour for tutors, which is great. Put a lot of money out there, but you have to have the people. So I think several issues. One is not having a lot of people out there to employ. What basic skills do those people have to help tutor?
Okay.
High school diploma? Do they have to have a 2-year degree? Who's going to assess them and make sure that we're bringing people that can actually assist a kid in tutoring, math, or reading, whatever? So I'm not opposed at all. I don't think anyone on the education committee would be able to put $100 or $200 million into a high-level tutoring program if we can find
the bodies.
Questions: where are we going to find them? Where are they at? How do we assess their capabilities to do that job? How much do we pay them? So I think that's still those conversations that we're having. But we've got some one-time money. We have about $2 billion of one-time money, which the budget this year is going to tap into $1 billion of that if we can get the House to agree with it. But we'll still be sitting on $1 billion that we can pull some one-time dollars to do that.
Okay, that would be terrific. The job market will soften, eventually with higher interest rates and that federal gusher of money kind of unwinding, and then maybe there'll be more opportunities there. When we talk about paying people, an attractive level of income, you've been at the forefront of trying to make sure that teachers in Oklahoma get some pay raises and play a little catch up in our region. As a leader of a school organization, as an owner of a business, you and I both know that in order to accomplish great objectives and reach a high level of excellence, you got to have talent, and you got to have committed people, and they have to have a compensation level that's attractive. We've been playing catch up, the last 5-6 years, and that's good. But I'm wondering from, your perspective as a lifelong educator, what should the target range be for teacher pay so we're not always chasing, everybody else, because once we give a pay raise, then they give a pay raise, and then we're still kind of in the bottom quartile. What's the target range? Should we shoot for the national average, Senator? Should we shoot for the top 25% to leapfrog, some of the folks in our region? What do you think the target level would be that would start to communicate, hey, be teachers in Oklahoma, come back, go become a teacher, we want you?
I've thought a lot about that. Since I've been in the legislature, we're always looking at being regional average. Well, the region, we're not in the highest paid region, so when you want to be average in a low to medium region, that's not very good. Never understood why we didn't want to be number one in the region, but it's hard to jump up there with Massachusetts and pay your starting team.
Yeah, we don't have to be Massachusetts.
We're not going to be there, but I think we need to be in that top 30-40%. Anyhow, I think we need to be paying our teachers like we would other professions, to feel like they're professionals and they're wanted and they're coveted in the state. You're going to pay them like professionals. So I'd say in that 60 range.
Agreed. Lastly, when it comes to, accountability and transparency, there's been a lot of discussion about this, A through F, grading scale with schools. And we launched that legislation. And I remember, Senator, when I voted for it, I don't really understand how this grading system works on whether a school is A through F. I just know, it would be good to measure the schools. And, it's gone through its permutations now. I mean, what's the right thought process where we want parents to have some idea of whether, their school is performing, but on the other hand, it's pretty complicated to grade schools. And I haven't yet sort of heard the right way, or at least the way to make sense to, appropriately grade our schools. It's easy for, guys like me who live in the Jenks school district, but, across the state, it's obviously different. Where do you think the conversation should be headed going forward?
I think, I've been through this for several years, as a school administrator, and even in the cabinet, talked about school report card. There are those that like it. There are those that don't. I think the people start talking about using different terminology like proficient or not proficient or advanced. But I think the reason they use the AF is because all of us, ever since we were little, have always, report cards have always been A, B, C, be A, B, C, D, or F. So I think they feel like the average person understands what a C is. That's average, and B or an A or whatever. So that's been the thought process. So I'm not opposed to keeping the AF report card.
Okay.
But what encompasses that AF report card is what it's all about. Right now, the report card has to be sent out to the parents. Now they're mailed out every year. They weren't several years ago, but now those are mailed out to the parents where their schools are. But they're based now on growth. We're not just grading them on their scores in math, science, English, and social studies, but we're throwing those things that the schools can't control, but the schools are held responsible for them. So I can't make a child go to school, but I'm being held responsible for it. I can't make a child, do certain things. So that was the conversation. It went for about 20, 30 minutes, and the bill passed. I don't know if it'll make the floor this year, but I think it's opened the conversation up.
More progress, more work ahead. We've been so lucky to have your expertise in the state Senate. I'm a little disappointed that you're not running for re-election, but I get it. Hopefully you will train and mentor your replacement on all things education. But we're grateful that you spent some time with us today, Senator Pemberton. You always make me smarter on some of this education stuff, so I really appreciate it. I know our participants and listeners are going to love it. So we wish you an awesome next few days with all those grandkids before you're back in the grind at the Capitol, and just have a super blessed time.
The Committee for Oklahoma Prosperity is advancing ideas and policy that create growth and prosperity for the people of Oklahoma.